possibility. Soar, eat ether, see what has never been seen. Depart, be lost, but climb. Edna St. Vincent Millay. How can I realize my potential more fully? That's a question I still ask myself, especially when contemplating what's next in my life. In every job I've taken, in every city in which I've lived, I've known that it's time to move on when I've grown as much as I can. Sometimes moving on terrified me, but always it taught me that the true meaning of courage is to be afraid and then, with your knees knocking, to step out anyway. Making a bold move is the only way to advance toward the grandest vision the universe has for you. If you allow it, fear will completely immobilize you. And once it has you in its grip, it will fight to keep you from ever becoming your best self. What I know for sure is this: whatever you fear most has no power. It is your fear that has the power. The thing itself cannot touch you, but your fear can rob you of your life. Each time you give in to it, you lose strength, while your fear gains it. That's why you must decide that no matter how difficult the path ahead seems, you will push past your anxiety and keep on stepping. A few years ago, I was writing this question in my journal every day. What am I afraid of? Over time, I realized that while I'd often seemed brave on the outside, I'd lived much of my inner life in bondage. I was afraid that others wouldn't like me. I was terrified that if I said no to people, they would reject me. Everything I did, thought, felt, said, or even ate was connected to the fear I carried around with me, and I allowed it to block me from ever knowing who I really was. Dr. Phil often says, you can't change what you don't acknowledge. Before I could challenge my fear and begin changing what I believed about myself, I had to admit that, yes, I had always been afraid, and that my fear was a form of slavery. Author Neil Donald Walsh says, so long as you're still worried about what others think of you, you're owned by them. Only when you require no approval from outside yourself can you own yourself. It's true that when you summon the courage to cast a vote for yourself, when you dare to step out, speak up, change yourself, or even simply do something outside of what others call the norm, the results may not always be pleasant. You can expect obstacles. You will fall down. Others may call you nutty. At times, it may feel like the whole world is rising up to tell you who you cannot become and what you cannot do. It can upset people when you exceed the limited expectations they've always had for you. And in moments of weakness, your fear and self-doubt may cause you to falter. You may be so exhausted that you want to quit, but the alternatives are even worse. You might find yourself stuck in a miserable rut for years at a time, or you could spend too many days languishing in regret, always wondering, what would my life have been like if I hadn't cared so much about what people thought? And what if you decided right now that you will stop letting fear block you? What if you learn to live with it, to ride its wave to heights you never knew were possible? You might discover the joy of tuning out what everybody wants for you and finally pay attention to what you want and need. And learn that ultimately you have nothing to prove to anyone but yourself. That is what it truly means to live without fear and to keep reaching for your best life. The true measure of your courage is not whether you reach your goal, it's whether you decide to get back on your feet no matter how many times you failed. I know it is not easy, but I also know for sure that having the courage to stand up and pursue your wildest dreams will give you life's richest reward and life's greatest adventure. And what's really wild? Right now, no matter where you are a single choice away from a new beginning. One of my defining moments came in the 3rd grade. The day a book report I turned in earned my teacher's praise and made my classmates grudgingly whisper, she thinks she's so smart. For too many years after that, my biggest fear was that others would see me as arrogant. In some ways, even my weight was my apology to the world, my way of saying, see, I really don't think I'm better than you. I'm not that smart. The last thing I wanted was for my actions to make me appear full of myself. Beginning when we're girls, most of us are taught to deflect praise. We apologize for our accomplishments. We try to level the field with our family and friends by downplaying our brilliance. We settle for the passenger seat when we long to drive. That's why so many of us have been willing to hide our light as adults. Instead of being filled with all the passion and purpose that enable us to offer our best to the world, we empty ourselves in an effort to silence our critics. The truth is that the naysayers in your life can never and will never be fully satisfied. Whether you hide or shine, they'll always feel threatened because they don't believe they are enough. So stop paying attention to them. Just stop paying attention to them. When you suppress some part of yourself or allow others to play you small, you are ignoring the owner's manual your Creator gave you. What I know for sure is this: you are built not to shrink down to less, but to blossom into more, to be more splendid, to be more extraordinary, to use every moment to fill yourself up. In 1989, I read this passage in Gary Zukav's book, The Seat of the Soul. Every action, thought, and feeling is motivated by an intention, and that intention is a cause that exists as one with an effect. If we participate in the cause, it is not possible for us not to participate in the effect. In this most profound way, we are held responsible for our every action, thought, and feeling, which is to say, for our every intention. It is therefore wise for us to become aware of the many intentions that inform our experience, to sort out which intentions produce which effects, and to choose our intentions according to the effects that we desire to produce. That was one paragraph, but it was a life-changing paragraph for me. I'd recognized for a long time that I was responsible for my life, that every choice produced a consequence, but often the consequences seemed so out of line with my expectations. That's because I was expecting one thing, but intending another. My intention of always trying to please other people, for example, produced an unwanted consequence. I often felt taken advantage of and used, and people came to expect more and more and more from me. But the principle of intention helped me realize that other people weren't the problem. I was. I decided to do only those things that came from the truth of who I am, and doing only that which pleased me to do for others. What I know for sure is that whatever your situation is right now, you have played a major role in creating it. With every experience, you build your life, thought by thought, choice by choice. And beneath each of those thoughts and choices lies your deepest intention. That's why before I make any decision, I ask myself this critical question: what is my real intention? Since reading that passage in The Seat of the Soul, I have seen time and time again how knowing the answer to that question can be your guiding force. The reverse is also true. When you do not examine your intention, you often end up with consequences that block your progress. Over the years, I've witnessed far too many couples who stayed married when they shouldn't have, simply because their intention was just that, to be married rather than to be fulfilled. And in the end, each of those couples had a relationship in which there was no regard for intimacy, growth, or building a strong life. If you are feeling stuck in your life and you want to move forward, start by examining your past motivations or intentions. Look closely. I've learned that my truest intentions are often hiding in the shadows. Ask yourself, how have my intentions produced the experiences I'm having now? And if I change my intentions, what different consequences will I create? As you make choices that honor who you are, you will get exactly what life intended for you. The chance to reach your greatest potential. I have always had a great relationship with money, even when I barely had any to relate to. I never feared not having it and never obsessed about what I had. Like most people, I can remember every salary I ever made. I suppose we remember because a salary helps define the value of our service and, unfortunately for some people, the value they place on themselves. I first realized I was not my salary when I was 15 and making 50 cents an hour babysitting Mrs. Ashbury's rowdy kids and cleaning up after she pulled nearly every outfit from her closet every time she got dressed. Her bedroom always looked like the end of the day last call sale at Macy's with shoes and brightly colored necklaces and dresses everywhere. Just before flitting out the door without leaving any info as to where she was going or how she could be reached, she'd say, "Oh, by the way, dear, would you mind tidying things up a bit?" Well, yes, of course I did mind, and the first time I tidied up, I did such a great job, I thought surely she'd pay me extra when she saw how I cleaned not only her room, but the kids' rooms too. She never did. So I moved on and found a job that would pay me more, a job where I thought my efforts would be appreciated. There was a 5 and dime not far from my father's store, and I got hired there for $1.50 an hour. My job was to keep things straight, stock shelves, fold socks. I wasn't allowed to work the cash register or speak to customers. I hated it. 2 hours in, I found myself counting the minutes to lunch, then counting the minutes to quitting time. Even at 15, I knew in my soul this was no way to live or make money. I was bored beyond anything I've ever felt before or since. So after 3 days, I quit and went to work in my father's store for no salary. I didn't like working there either, but at least I could talk to people and not feel like my spirit was being drained by the hour. Still, I knew that no matter how much my father wanted it to be, that store would not be a part of my future life. By the time I was 17, I was working in radio, making $100 a week, and that's when I made my peace with money. I decided that no matter what job I ever did, I wanted that same feeling I got when I first started in radio. The feeling of, I love this so much, even if you didn't pay me, I'd show up every day, on time, and happy to be here. I recognized then, at 17, what I now know for sure. If you can get paid for doing what you love, every paycheck is a bonus. Give yourself the bonus of a lifetime. Pursue your passion. Discover what you love. Then do it. I have never been a whitewater rafting, bungee jumping kind of girl. That is not how I define adventure. What I know for sure is this. The most important adventure of our lives doesn't have to involve climbing the highest peak or trekking around the world. The biggest thrill you can ever achieve is to live the life of your dreams. Maybe you're like so many women I've talked to over the years who've suspended their deepest desires in order to accommodate everything and everyone else. You ignore the nudge, that whisper that often comes in the form of emptiness or restlessness, to finally get on with what you know you should be doing. I understand how easy it is to rationalize. Your mate and your children need you. The job that you admit makes you miserable demands so much of your time. But what happens when you work hard at something that is unfulfilling? It drains your spirit. it robs you of your life force. You end up depleted, depressed, and angry. You don't have to waste another day on that road. You can begin again. Starting over begins with looking inward. It means ridding yourself of distractions and paying attention to that inkling you've been ignoring. I've learned that the more stressful and chaotic things are on the outside, the calmer you need to get on the inside. It's the only way you can connect with where your spirit is leading you. Many years ago, as a young television reporter at WJZ in Baltimore, I was given what was considered a plum assignment. I was sent to Los Angeles to interview a few television stars. At first, I was thrilled. Here was a chance to prove myself a good interviewer, alone, without the help of my usual co-anchor, and to add some celebrity cachet to my career experience. But by the time I arrived in California, I felt like a small fish dropped into the Hollywood fishbowl. I started to doubt myself. Who was I to think I could just walk into their world and expect them to talk to me? Reporters from all over the country had been invited. There were throngs of us, local newscasters, entertainment, lifestyle reporters, each given 5 minutes to interview an actor from the TV season's upcoming lineup. I started to feel nervous, uncomfortable, inept. Not good enough to be there with all those other reporters from much bigger cities with more experience than I. To make matters worse, a representative for Priscilla Presley, who was there for a new show she was hosting, told me, as I was 11th in line to talk to her, "You can ask her anything, but whatever you do, don't mention Elvis. She'll walk out on you." So now I wasn't just intimidated by this new world of stars and their handlers. I was feeling completely inhibited. I'd been a TV reporter since I was 19. I'd interviewed hundreds of people in difficult situations and prided myself on being able to break the ice and establish rapport. But I wasn't accustomed to real stars. I thought they had some mystique that being famous made them not only different but also better than us regular folk. And I was having difficulty figuring out how I'd pull that off in a 5-minute time frame, with the most real questions being off limits. For some reason, you might call it a coincidence, I call it grace in action, I was switched from the Priscilla Presley line to interview a young comedian who was starting a new show called Mork and Mindy. What followed were 5 of the most exhilarating, wild, off-the-charts minutes I've ever spent in an interview, with the most uninhibited, out-of-the-box, free-falling and every-second celebrity human I'd ever met. I don't remember a word I said, but I know I hardly said any. He was a geyser of energy. I remember thinking, whoever this guy is, he's gonna be big. He wasn't afraid to be his many selves. I had great fun playing with Robin Williams for the first time, and I learned in that instant to go where the interview takes you. He was all over the place, and I just had to flow with it. So when my turn came to talk to Miss Priscilla Presley, I for sure had received the lesson. You can't accomplish anything worthwhile if you inhibit yourself. I asked about Elvis. She didn't walk out. In fact, she obliged me with an answer. If life teaches you nothing else, know this. When you get the chance, go for it. My biggest mistakes in life have all stemmed from giving my power to someone else, believing that the love others had to offer was more important than the love I had to give to myself. I remember being 29 and in a relationship based on lies and deceit, down on my knees, crying after Mr. Man, who we shall not name here, once again had brought me low. I'd been waiting for him all evening. He stood me up, and it wasn't the first time. He arrived hours after our date was supposed to start. And I dared to ask why. I remember him standing in the doorway and hurling these words at me. "The problem with you, baby doll, is that you think you're special." At which point, he turned on his heels and slammed the door in my face. I'd grown up watching my cousin Alice be physically abused by her boyfriend, and I'd vowed I would never take such treatment. But sitting there on the bathroom floor, after Mr. Man walked out, I saw with great clarity the only difference between Alice and me was that I hadn't been hit. Mr. Man was wrong. I did not think I was special, and that was the problem. Why was I allowing myself to be treated this way? Even with these insights, it took me another year to end the relationship. I kept hoping and praying that things would get better, that he would change. He never did. I started praying for the strength to just end it. I'd pray and wait to feel better and wait, all the while repeating my same old patterns. Until one day, I got it. While I was waiting on God, God was waiting on me. He was waiting on me to make a decision to either pursue the life that was meant for me or to be stifled by the one I was living. I recognized the truth that I'm all right, just as I am. I am enough, all by myself. That revelation brought its own miracle. Around that time, the call came for me to audition for a talk show in Chicago. If I had stayed entangled in that relationship, my life as I know it would never have happened. What is the truth of your life? It is your duty to know. In order to find out, know that the truth is that which feels right and good and loving. Love doesn't hurt, I've learned in the years since I was 29. It feels really good. It's that which allows you to live every day with integrity. Everything you do and say shows the world who you are. Let it be the truth. I'll never forget the moment when I decided to always choose myself. I recall what I was wearing, a blue turtleneck and black slacks, where I was sitting, in my boss's office, what the chair looked and felt like, brown paisley, too deep and overstuffed. When my boss, the general manager at the Baltimore TV station where I work, said, "There is no way you can make it in Chicago. You are walking into a landmine, and you can't even see it. You're committing career suicide." He used every tactic he could muster to entice me to stay. More money, a company car, a new apartment, and finally, intimidation. "You are going to fail," he said. I didn't know if he was right. I didn't have the confidence to believe I could succeed, but somehow I gathered the nerve to say to him before standing up and walking out, "You are right. I may not make it, and I may be walking into landmines. But if they don't kill me, at least I'll keep growing." In that moment, I chose happiness, the lasting happiness that abides with me every day because I decided not to be afraid and to move forward. Staying in Baltimore would have been the safe thing to do. But sitting in my boss's office, I knew that if I let him talk me into staying, it would affect the way I felt about myself forever. I would always wonder what could have been. That one choice changed the trajectory of my life. I live in a state of exhilarated contentment. That's my definition of happiness. Fueled by a passion for everything I'm committed to. My work, my colleagues, my home, my gratitude for every breath taken in freedom and peace. And what makes it sweeter is knowing for sure that I created this happiness. It was my choice. Time is fleeting. Those of you with children are ever cognizant of this fact because your children keep growing out of and into themselves. The goal for all of us is to keep growing out of ourselves too, evolving to our best possible lives. Somewhere deep within me, even when I was a teenager, I always sensed that something bigger was in store for me. But it was never about attaining wealth or celebrity. It was about the process of continually seeking to be better, to challenge myself, to pursue excellence on every level. What I know for sure, only when you make that process your goal can your dream life follow. That doesn't mean your process will lead you to wealth or fame. In fact, your dream may have nothing to do with tangible prosperity and everything to do with creating a life filled with joy, one with no regrets and a clear conscience. I've learned that, yes, wealth is a tool that gives you choices, but it cannot compensate for a life not fully lived, and it certainly cannot create a sense of peace within you. The whole point of being alive is to become the person you were intended to be, to grow out of and into yourself again and again. I believe you can do this only when you stop long enough to hear the whisper you might have drowned out, that small voice compelling you toward your calling. And what happens then? You face the biggest challenge of all, to have the courage to seek your dream regardless of what anyone else says or thinks. You are the only person alive who can see your big picture, and even you can't see it all. The truth is that as much as you plan and dream and move forward in your life, you must remember that you are always acting in conjunction with the flow and energy of the greater universe. Move in the direction of your goal with all the force and verve you can muster, and then let go, releasing your plan to the power, capital P, that's bigger than yourself, and allowing your dream to manifest as its own masterpiece. Dream big, really big. Work hard, really hard. And after you've done all you can, fully surrender to the power, capital P. Awe. In the word question, there is a beautiful word. Quest. I love that word. Elie Wiesel. I no longer make a list of New Year's resolutions. I do, however, give considerable thought every January as to how I can continue to move forward. One New Year's morning, I was sitting on my front porch in Hawaii, overlooking the ocean, meditating. I prayed to be more resolved about being fully conscious, allowing every experience to bring me closer to the deepest essence of life. By nightfall, my prayer had been answered in the most profound spiritual encounter I've ever had. My friend Bob Green and I were taking a hike that afternoon. The sun had set, leaving wisps of lavender ribbons across the sky. Clouds, moving down from the mountains, spread out over the ocean with only a small opening through which we could see the moon. All around us was this cloud mist, and just one clear space of sky glowing with the light of a crescent moon. "Look at that," Bob said. "It looks like the DreamWorks logo. I feel like climbing up and sitting there with a fishing pole." It was surreal. As we continued our walk, Bob turned to me and said, "Stop a minute." I stopped. "Can you hear that?" he whispered. I could, and it took my breath away. It was the sound of silence, utter and complete stillness. So still, I could hear my own heart beating. I wanted to hold my breath, because even inhaling and exhaling was a cacophony. There was absolutely no movement, no breeze, no recognition of air even. It was the sound of nothing and everything. It felt like all life and death and beyond contained in one space, and I was not just standing in it, I was also part of it. This was the most peaceful, coherent, knowledgeable moment I've ever experienced. Heaven on earth. We stood there for the longest time, trying not to breathe, in awe. I realized this was exactly what I had asked for earlier in the day. This is the meaning of ask and it shall be given. Seek and ye shall find. That moment was indeed the deepest essence of life. And what I know for sure, that moment is always available to us. If you peel back the layers of your life, the frenzy, the noise, stillness is waiting. That stillness is you. This is what I call a glory, glory, hallelujah moment. I wanted to hold on to it forever. And I have. Sometimes I'll be in the middle of a meeting with people lined up outside my door, and I'll just inhale and take myself back to the road, the clouds, the moon, stillness, peace. I'm often confronted by things about which I have no certainty at all, but I for sure believe in miracles. For me, a miracle is seeing the world with light in your eyes. It's knowing there's always hope and possibility where none seems to exist. Many people are so closed to miracles that even when one is boldly staring them in the face, they label it coincidence. I call it like I see it. To me, miracles are confirmation that something larger than us is at work. I believe they happen not just sometimes, but every single day if we're open to seeing them. In my own life, miracles often involve the simplest things like being able to run 5 miles in less than 50 minutes, or being exhausted after a long run and craving a bowl of red pepper and tomato soup, then walking into the kitchen and find that my godmother, Mrs. E, left some on the stove for me. A miracle is watching a sunset, the color of strained peaches, and seeing it turn to raspberries by the end of my evening walk. It's having pomegranate, kiwi, and mango on a pretty tray for breakfast. It's admiring the pink peonies I cut from my own garden and placed in my bedroom. It's when a green minivan pauses on the road and a young woman leans out the window to yell, "You're the best teacher on TV!" And she herself is a kindergarten teacher. It's the sound of the birds and their individual songs, and the moment when I wonder, are they singing to each other, to themselves, or just to be heard? A miracle is the chance to roll in the grass with all of my dogs and enjoy a full Sunday stretched before me with no obligations, no plans, no place to be. It's the chance to come back to myself after a week of going and have time to finally just be alone. To meditate on a log cabin porch, leaves rustling like water, newborn geese in the pond with their mother teaching them to swim. To feel the joy of this glorious life and have the chance to live it as a free woman. If I know nothing else for sure, I know that the big miracles we're waiting on are happening right in front of us, at every moment, with every breath. Open your eyes and heart, and you'll see them. Getting older is the best thing that ever happened to me. I awakened to a morning prayer of thanks posted on my bathroom wall from Marianne Williamson's book, Illuminata. Whatever age I'm at, I think about all the people who never made it that far. I think about the people who were called before they realized the beauty and majesty of life on earth. I know for sure that every day holds within it the possibility of seeing the world with wonder. The older I get, the less tolerance I have for pettiness and superficial pursuits. There's a wealth that has nothing to do with dollars that comes from the perspective and wisdom of paying attention to your life. It has everything to teach you. And what I know for sure is that the joy of learning well is the greatest reward. I have heard truly amazing stories over the years about almost every human situation: conflict, defeat, triumph, resilience. But I've rarely been more awed than I was by John Diaz's story. In October 2000, John was on Singapore Airlines Flight 006 when it exploded at takeoff. 83 people perished in the flames. John and 95 others survived. John, who describes himself as a very straightforward, competitive, and pragmatic kind of guy, still endures physical pain from his injuries, but in other ways, he is more alive than he was before he literally went through the fire. The plane took off in typhoon-like conditions. Before John boarded, his instinct told him not to. He had called the airline several times. "Are you sure this plane is taking off?" Because it was storming so badly. Peering out the window as the plane taxied, all he could see, he said, was rain. He was sitting in the very front of the plane and watched as the nose started to lift. But the 747 had turned down the wrong runway. At first, he felt a small bump, the plane hitting a concrete barrier, followed by a huge bump right next to him where something, a backhoe, ripped a hole in the side of the plane right near where he was seated. His seat came unbolted and was thrown sideward. He could feel the motion of the plane rolling and spinning down the runway. And then it stopped. In his words, "Then the explosion hit. A great fireball came right out and over me all the way up to the nose of the plane and then sucked straight back, almost like in the movies. And then there was this spray of jet fuel like napalm. Whatever it hit, ignited like a torch. And a gentleman, an Asian gentleman, comes running right up to me, fully aflame. I could see all his features, and there was a look of wonder on his face, like he didn't even know he was dead and burning. I figured, well, I must be the same. I really thought at that point I was dead." I asked John if he believed it was divine intervention that saved him. He said no. He said what helped him get out was his position in the plane and quick thinking. To protect himself from the smoke and flames, he covered his head with the leather bag he'd been encouraged not to carry on, then looked for the door and kept moving. And then he shared something I still think about to this day. The inside of the plane, John said, looked like Dante's Inferno with people strapped to their seats just burning. It seemed like an aura was leaving their bodies, some brighter than others. I thought the brightness and dimness of the auras were how one lives one's life. John says, that experience, seeing what he could only describe as auras and energy of light leaving the bodies and floating above the flames, changed him, made him a more empathetic person. And although he still won't call his brush with death a miracle, he does say, I want to live my life so my aura, when it leaves, is very bright. What I know for sure, it is an awesome gift to be alive on this beautiful planet. And I want my time here to be as bright as it can be. I know for sure there is no real meaning to life without a spiritual component. Spirit to me is the essence of who we are. It doesn't require any particular belief. It just is. And the key to this essence is simply being aware of the present moment. It is transformative. It redefines what it means to be alive. Spirituality can be something as ordinary and extraordinary as giving your full force 100% attention to another person without thinking about what else you need to be doing right then. Or making an effort to do something good for someone. Or starting your day with a full moment of silence. Or waking up to literally smell the coffee, tasting its aroma through your senses, making every sip sheer pleasure, and when it's no longer sheer pleasure, putting it aside. What I know for sure, the light in your life comes in one conscious breath at a time. Breathe easy. My entire life is a miracle, and so is yours. That I know for sure. No matter how you came to be, whether you were wanted or an accident, as I was labeled for so many years, your being here to hear these words is awesome. I say this not knowing the details of your life, of course. What I do know is that every person carries her own story of hope and sorrow, victory and loss, redemption, joy, and light. Everyone has had her share of life lessons. How well you learn from them is up to you. When you choose to see the world as a classroom, you understand that all experiences are here to teach you something about yourself, and that your life's journey is about becoming more of who you are. Another miracle, we all get to share in the journey. The hardest experiences are often the ones that teach us the most. Whenever trouble comes my way, I try to ask myself, what is this really about, and what am I supposed to learn from it? Only when I perceive what the real lesson is, can I make the best decision and grow from the experience. After everything that's happened to me in all my years on this earth, what I'm most proud of is that I remain open to evolving. I know that every physical encounter has a metaphysical meaning, and I'm open to seeing it all. I was lucky enough to spend some time in Fiji several years ago, and while I was there, I loved watching the waves break gently on shore. I think of each ripple as each of us in the sea that is life. We believe we're all so different, but we're not. We cover ourselves in customs and costumes of aspiration and struggle and victory and sacrifice and loss, and soon we forget who we really are. One morning as I sat watching the waves, I emailed my poet friend, Mark Nepo, whose Book of Awakening is a year's worth of daily lessons for living a more intentional life. Mark's email response was this: You ask about poetry. You ask from an island so far away it remains unspoiled, to walk quietly till the miracle in everything speaks, is poetry. You want to look for poetry in your soul and in everyday life, as you search for stones on the beach. 4,000 miles away, as the sun ices the snow, here I smile. For in this moment, you are the poem. After years of looking, I can only say that searching for small things worn by the deep is the art of poetry. But listening to what they say is the poem. Well, I never thought of poetry that way before, but sitting on the edge of an island, I could feel that what Mark said in the rest of his email was also true. He wrote this: For me, poetry is the unexpected utterance of the soul. It is where the soul touches the everyday. It is less about words and more about awakening the sense of aliveness we carry within us from birth. To walk quietly till the miracle in everything speaks is poetry, whether we write it down or not. I confess, I started out wanting to write great poems, only to be worn by life to wanting to discover true poems. And now, in the second half of life, I feel humbled and excited to want to be the poem. Well, that for sure is an inspiration worth holding. To not just appreciate the poetry, but to be the poem. Spirituality for me is recognizing that I'm connected to the energy of all creation, that I'm a part of it, and it is always a part of me. Whatever label or word we use to describe it, doesn't matter. Words are completely inadequate. Spirituality is not religion. You can be spiritual and not have a religious context. The opposite is true, too. You can be very religious with no spiritual dimension, just doctrine. Spirituality isn't something I believe in. It's what and who I am. Knowing this has made all the difference. It allows me to live fearlessly and to make manifest the purpose of my creation. And I will be bold enough to say, I know for sure it is the greatest discovery of life to recognize that you're more than your body and your mind. Over the years, I've read hundreds of books that have helped me become more spiritually attuned. One of them, in particular, A New Earth by Eckhart Tolle, resonated so deeply with me that it caused a shift in the way I perceived myself and all things. The book is essentially about recognizing that you are not your thoughts and seeing, then changing the way your ego-based mind dominates your life. Allowing the truth of who you are, your spiritual self, to rule your life means you stop struggling and learn to move with the flow of your life. To quote from A New Earth, there are 3 words that convey the secret of the art of living, the secret of all success and happiness. One with life. Being one with life is being one with now. You then realize that you don't live your life, but life lives you. Life is the dancer, and you are the dance. End of quote. The joy and vitality that comes from being that dance are unmatched by any pleasure you can imagine. What it takes, I've learned, is being committed to experiencing life's spiritual essence. And that, as I've said in conversations with Eckhart Tolle, is a decision you make daily to be in the world, but not of it. Remember those internet rumors about the year 2012? For those of you not familiar with the prophecies of global change, based partly on the cycles of the Mayan calendar, suffice it to say that some people predicted a cataclysmic collapse of human civilization, while others foresaw a time of spiritual transformation. Of course, no one can predict the future, but one thing I do know for sure is the power of intention, and my intention is to approach every year as one of great promise. No doomsday for me. I hope to do my part within myself and within the world to bring about a shift that lets us live more authentically, more lovingly, more intuitively, more creatively, and more collaboratively. That's my idea of spiritual evolution, of a spiritual revolution. I chose to see 2012 as the dawning of a new year of alignment because with alignment comes enlightenment. When you are aligned with your heart's desire, when you're in sync with who you're meant to be and how you're supposed to contribute to our magnificent earth, you feel a shift in perception. You start to notice moments of what some people call serendipity, but I like to call marvelisms. Because when I'm doing everything I'm meant to do to keep my mind, body, and spirit whole, I constantly marvel at how other experiences fall into place. It's as though that beautiful line in Paulo Coelho's novel, The Alchemist, comes true, when he wrote, "When you want something, all the universe conspires in helping you to achieve it." My goal, to stay open to all the universe has to offer, every year, every day. One of the things I often ask God, please show me who I really am. That may seem like an odd question, but as I go through life, I want to never lose sight of the truth of my existence. One of my favorite life quotes comes from the French philosopher priest Pierre Teilhard de Chardin. We are not human beings having a spiritual experience. We are spiritual beings having a human experience, he said. To make that experience as purposeful and poetic as possible is my heart's single greatest desire, for sure. Breathe with me for a moment. Place your hands on your stomach and feel it expand as you inhale. Then let it contract and deflate as you exhale. That cycle happens on average 720 times an hour, more than 17,000 times a day, without your even thinking about it. The biological wonder of a breath is so easy to take for granted, but every now and again, I get still enough to notice it. And when I do, wow. For sure, I stand in awe of the miracle that is life. Walking barefoot across an earthy carpet of freshly mown grass. Wow, it feels so good. Another wow. Every night at sunset, friends and neighbors gather on my front porch to watch what we call the greatest show on earth. We take pictures and compare the color variations of each magnificent light show as the sun dips below the horizon. One day not long ago, it rained for 4 hours straight, a steady downpour. And then suddenly it stopped. Wow. Everything, trees, fences, sky, was luminescent. For me, nature is one great big wow after another. And sometimes its smallest offerings are the ones that open my soul to its splendor. For my birthday one year, a florist friend who's created spectacular arrangements of every sort gave me one of my most treasured gifts ever. 2 small leaves, shaped like hearts. I keep them pressed between the pages of my favorite book, Eckhart Tolle's A New Earth. Every time I open it, I am reminded how simple and beautiful life can be, if we choose to see it that way. Seeking the fullest expression of self. That's the story of my life, in 6 words. My personal definition of what I'm all about, at least for now. I think of it as my mini-memoir, but in writing it, I was reminded that my definition has always been and still is evolving. Words I would have used last year don't apply today because if we're really committed to growth, we never stop discovering new dimensions of self and self-expression. A few years ago, I went to Fairfield, Iowa, population 9,500, smack in the middle of Midwestern farmland. The last place you'd expect to get stuck in an evening traffic jam caused by hundreds of people heading off to practice transcendental meditation. But that's what they do in Fairfield. In fact, it's often referred to as TM Town. The action takes place in 2 golden dome-shaped buildings, one for the women, one for the men. Housewives, shop clerks, engineers, waitresses, lawyers, moms, single ladies, and me, we all gathered in our dome for the sole purpose of being still. Knowing that stillness is the space where all creative expression, peace, light, and love come to be. It was a powerfully energizing, yet calming experience. I didn't want it to end. When it did, I walked away feeling fuller than when I'd come in, full of hope, a sense of contentment, and profound joy. Knowing for sure that even in the daily craziness that bombards us from every direction, there is the constancy of stillness. Only from that space can you create your best work and your best life. I try to give myself a healthy dose of quiet time at least once, and when I'm on point, twice a day, 20 minutes in the morning, 20 in the evening. It helps me sleep better and focus more deeply. It boosts my productivity and fuels my creativity. Try it, and I think you'll agree that Linda the Good Witch was right. You have always had the power. You've always had it. You just have to be still to find it. And when you do, you're on the way to finding the fullest expression of you. I've always thought of myself as a seeker. And by that I mean my heart is open to seeing in all forms the divine order and exquisite perfection with which the universe operates. I am beguiled by the mystery of life. As a matter of fact, on my nightstand, I keep a book called In Love with the Mystery by Anne Mortifee. It's full of tranquil photographs and bite-sized reminders of the preciousness of the wondrous journey we're all on. Here is one of my favorite passages. Let the power come. Let ecstasy erupt. Allow your heart to expand and overflow with adoration for this magnificent creation and for the love, wisdom, and power that birthed it all. Rapture is needed now. Rapture, reverence, and grace. I find solace and inspiration in those words. Too often we block the power that is ever present and available to us because we're so wrapped up in doing that we lose sight of being. I often wonder what Steve Jobs saw when he uttered his last words. Oh, wow. Oh, wow. Oh, wow. I wonder if it was the same vision the mother of a 26-year-old cancer patient shared on my show years ago. With his last breath, her son had said, "Oh, Mom, it's so simple." I believe we make our paths far more difficult than they need to be. Our struggle with and resistance to what is entangles us in constant chaos and frustration when it's all so simple. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And remember Newton's third law of motion. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. The energy you create and release into the world will be reciprocated on all levels. Our main job in life is to align with the energy that is the source of all energies and to keep our frequency tuned to the energy of love. This I know for sure. When that is your life's work, mystery solved, or at least the mystery no longer mystifies you. It only heightens the rapture, reverence, and grace. As the day got closer, I could not stop silently rejoicing. I'd tell myself, I'm turning 60, I'm turning 60. I was so glad I'd lived long enough to say those words and celebrate their meaning. I'm turning 60. I'm alive. I'm healthy. I'm strong. I'm turning 60. And please don't take offense. I no longer have to be concerned about what any of y'all think of me anymore. You know, the old, am I doing it right? Am I saying it right? Am I being what or who I'm supposed to be? When I turned 60, honey, I knew for sure that I had earned the right to be just as I am. And I am more secure in being myself than I've ever been. I have reached the moment Derek Walcott describes in his beautiful poem, Love After Love. He says, with elation, you will greet yourself arriving at your own door in your own mirror, and each will smile at the other's welcome. I am in awe of the way my journey here on earth continues to unfold. My life has been marked by miracles for as long as I can recall, and even before considering that my entire existence is the result of a one-time frolic under an oak tree. My early days speaking in a Mississippi Methodist church, Baptist leanings, shouting and Holy Ghost included, prepared me for a future of speaking in a public arena I could never have imagined. And now, I simply want to share what I've been given. I want to continue to encourage as many people as I can to open their hearts to life, because if I know anything for sure, it's that opening my own heart is what has brought me my greatest success and joy. My highest achievement? Never shutting down my heart. Even in my darkest moments through sexual abuse, a pregnancy at 14, lies and betrayals, I remain faithful, hopeful, and willing to see the best in people, regardless of whether they were showing me their worst. I continue to believe that no matter how hard the climb, there's always a way to let in a sliver of light to illuminate the path forward. We go through life discovering the truth about who we are and determining who has earned the right to share the space within our heart. This I also know for sure. God, however you define or refer to him, her, or it, is for us. The forces of nature are for us, offering us life in abundance. We humans narrow what is an open field of wonder and majesty to the myopic reality of our day-to-day experiences, but there is extraordinary in the ordinary. Some days, the awareness of the sanctity and sacredness of life just brings me to my knees with gratitude. I'm still trying to wrap my head around the idea that this little girl from Mississippi, who grew up holding her nose in an outhouse, now flies on her own plane. My own plane! To Africa, to help girls who grew up like me. Amazing grace. How sweet is that sound? I approach the milestone of 60 with humility, supreme thanksgiving, and joy, knowing for sure grace has brought me safe thus far, and grace will lead me home. Clarity. First, say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do. Epictetus. I was 40 years old before I learned to say no. In my early years of working in television, I was often overwhelmed by people's view of me as a benevolent caregiver. Some would spend their last dime on a bus ticket to get to me. Children would run away from home. Abused women would leave their husbands and show up at the doorstep of my studio, all hoping I would help them. In those days, I'd spend a lot of energy trying to get a girl back to her family or hanging on the phone with someone who was threatening to kill herself. I found myself writing check after check, and over time, that wore on my spirit. I was so busy trying to give all that everybody else needed me to offer that I lost touch with what I had a genuine desire to give. I had been consumed by the disease to please, and often the word yes would be out of my mouth before I even knew it. I know exactly where that disease came from. Having a history of abuse also meant a history of not being able to set boundaries. Once your personal boundaries have been violated as a child, it's difficult to regain the courage to stop people from stepping on you. You fear being rejected for who you really are, so for years, I spent my life giving everything I could to almost anyone who asked. I was running myself ragged, trying to fulfill other people's expectations of what I should do, who I should be. What cured me was understanding the principle of intention. To quote Gary Zukav again from his book, The Seat of the Soul, every action, thought, and feeling is motivated by an intention. And that intention is a cause that exists as one with an effect. If we participate in the cause, it is not possible for us not to participate in the effect. In this most profound way, we are held responsible for our every action, thought, and feeling, which is to say, for our every intention. I started to examine the intention behind my saying yes, when I really meant no. I was saying yes so people wouldn't be angry with me, so they would think I was a nice person. My intention was to make people feel I was the one they could call on, count on, last minute, no matter what. And that was exactly what my experiences reflected. A barrage of requests in every aspect of my life. Shortly, After I started to understand this, I got a call from somebody quite famous who wanted me to donate to his charity. He was asking for a lot of money, and I told him I had to think about it. What I thought about was, is this a cause I really believe in? No. Do I really think that writing a check is going to make any difference whatsoever? No. So why would I do it? Because I don't want this person to think I'm stingy. This was no longer a good enough reason for me. I wrote down a few words which I now keep on my desk. Never again will I do anything for anyone that I do not feel directly from my heart. I will not attend a meeting, make a phone call, write a letter, sponsor or participate in any activity in which every fiber of my being does not resound yes. I will act with the intent to be true to myself. I left this on my desk until I didn't have to read it anymore. It became a part of me. Before you say yes to anyone, ask yourself, what is my truest intention? It should come from the purest part of you, not from your head. If you have to ask for advice, give yourself time to let a yes or no resound within you. When it's right, your whole body and being feels it. I know for sure that I had to first get clear about who I was before I could beat the disease to please. When I accepted that I am a decent, kind, and giving person, whether I said yes or no, I no longer had anything to prove. I was once afraid of people saying, "Who does she think she is?" Now I have the courage to stand and say, "This is who I am." I am not nearly as stressed as people might imagine. Over the years, I've learned to focus my energy on the present, to be fully aware of what's happening in every moment, and not to worry about what should have happened, what's going wrong, or what might come next. Yet, because I do have an awful lot on my plate, if I didn't find a way to decompress, I'd be totally ineffective and probably a little crazy too. None of us is built to run nonstop. That's why when you don't give yourself the time and care you need, your body rebels in the form of sickness and exhaustion. How do I get back to myself? Well, hardly a day goes by that I don't talk things out with Gail. Almost every night I soak in a hot bath and light a candle or two. May sound hokey, but focusing on a burning candle for just a minute while taking deep and relaxing breaths is very calming. In the evenings right before sleep, I don't read or watch anything, including late-night news, that would give me anxiety. And because I don't like fitful dreams, I protect my sleep by dealing with difficult situations during my waking hours. I also keep a gratitude journal, and at the end of a workday, I come down by reading a great novel or just sitting with myself to come back to my center. It's what I call going mindless. As women, we have been programmed to sacrifice everything in the name of what is good and right for everyone else. Then, if there is an inch left over, maybe we can have a piece of that. We need to deprogram ourselves. I know for sure that you cannot give what you don't have. If you allow yourself to be depleted to the point where your emotional and spiritual tank is empty and you're running on fumes of habit, everybody loses, especially you. I once taped a show in which a life coach discussed the concept of self-care, putting your own needs ahead of anyone else's, and the audience booed. This was in the early 90s. Women were so upset by the mere suggestion that they should put their needs before those of their children. I interrupted to explain. No one was trying to say you should abandon your children and let them starve. The life coach was suggesting that you nurture yourself so you'll have more nurturing to give to those who most need you. It's the airplane oxygen mask theory. If you don't put on your mask first, you won't be able to save anyone else. So stop and take a look at your own needs. Go mindless. Let go. And remind yourself that this very moment is the only one you know you have for sure. What I know for sure is that your breath is your anchor, the gift you've been given, that we've all been given to center ourselves in this very moment. Whenever I have an encounter that involves even the slightest tension, I stop, draw in a deep breath, and release. Ever notice how often you unconsciously hold your breath? Once you start paying attention, it might surprise you to see how much tension you've been carrying around inside. Nothing is more effective than a deep, slow inhale and release for surrendering what you can't control and focusing again on what's right in front of you. Here's a confession. I have a fear of flying over the ocean. Though anytime I get on a plane, it's a flight of faith, a belief in something greater than myself, aeronautics, God. Flying over the ocean is particularly disconcerting. I'm not that good a swimmer. But when I have to cross continents, I just do it because I want to be bigger than my fear. I bought a home on a Hawaiian mountain because it was what I imagined paradise to be, knowing that every time I had to cross the Pacific to get there, I would challenge my fear. The day after Christmas a few years ago, my plane had been airborne long enough for us to pull out Scrabble and start thinking about lunch. Urania, my friend Bob Green's wife, had brought leftovers from Christmas dinner. "No more mashed potatoes for me," I said. "I'll just have turkey, dark meat preferably, and green beans." Our flight attendant, Karen, leaned over the table. I thought she was going to say, "There's no dark meat left." But instead she said calmly, "There is a slight crack in the windshield. We are going to have to turn around." "Oh," I replied. "The captain wants you to strap yourselves in and be ready for oxygen masks." Oxygen masks, I thought. What will happen to my dogs? They were lounging nearby. "They'll be fine," Karen said, the flight attendant. "We're going to drop to 10,000 feet now." I could feel my heart pounding and my voice rising, though I was trying to mirror her calmness. My mind was speeding. Oxygen, danger, oxygen, danger. I can't really swim that well. Oh boy, oh dear, oh dear, oh dear God. I didn't speak, but Corinne later said my eyes were as big as plums. Stedman, steady as a boulder, took my hand, looked me in the eye, and said, "You're going to be fine. God didn't bring you this far to leave you. Remember that." The crack had spread and shattered the entire left side of the windshield. We could see it from our seats now. Whoosh, thump, whoosh, thump. I know all the familiar sounds on that aircraft, and this was something different. I don't like hearing something different at 40,000 feet. What is that noise, Corinne?" "We're depressurizing the cabin," she said, "lowering altitude quickly, and that sound is the oxygen pump. The pilots are on oxygen, just in case." I didn't ask, just in case what, because we all knew the answer, just in case that wind chill blew. The pilots, Terry and Danny, turned the plane around, and I watched the clock. 27 minutes to landing, I thought. What if I'd listened to my inner voice and not flown today? Several times that morning I'd wanted to cancel. I was feeling off balance, rushed. I'd called Bob Green and said, "I may not go today." "Why?" he said. "Not feeling it." "What do you think?" And he said, "I think you should consult that trusted inner voice of yours." I had taken a bath since the tub is where I do my best thinking and got out ready to call the pilots and postpone that trip. And then I didn't. I overrode that feeling. If I hadn't, would the windshield still have cracked? No doubt. But would we have been over the ocean with no place to land? I looked at the clock again. 26 minutes and 12 seconds until landing. I was going to lose my mind watching that clock. So I started to read. Soon I felt a resolved calm. We'll be all right no matter the outcome. The whoosh, thump became a source of comfort. Oxygen, life. Oxygen, life. We landed safely, of course. The windshield was replaced, and the day after the pilot said, "We can fly anytime you're ready." Did I dare fly over the ocean again so soon? What was the lesson for me? Did I get it? I know for sure that whenever your inner GPS is off kilter, one of the most important questions a woman can ask herself, what do I really want? And what is my spirit telling me is the best way to proceed? My answer eventually led me toward my passion for serving women and girls. I have a deep understanding of what it's like to be a girl who suffered abuse or lived in poverty, and I believe that education is the door to freedom, the rainbow that leads to the pot of gold. I began to realize that in order to be most effective, I had to be extremely focused on using my time, my concern, my resources, my compassion to uplift a generation of courageous women who own themselves and know their strength. I knew I couldn't save every dying child or intervene in every case of abuse. None of us can. But once I got clear about what I most wanted to give, much of what didn't line up with that intention naturally fell away. Those years of becoming focused taught me a powerful lesson about letting go of the outside pressures and distractions and instead tuning into my gut, that inkling that says, hold on, something's not right here. Please pause and make an adjustment. For me, doubt often means don't. Don't move, don't answer, don't rush forward. When I'm mired in uncertainty about what the next step should be, when I'm asked to do something for which I feel little enthusiasm, that's my sign to just stop, to get still, until my instincts give me the go-ahead. I believe that uncertainty is my spirit's way of whispering, I'm in flux. I can't decide for you. Something is off balance here. I take that as a cue to recenter myself before making a decision. When the universe compels me toward the best path to take, it never leaves me with maybe, should I, or even perhaps. I always know for sure when it's telling me to proceed, because everything inside me rises up to reverberate, yes. Around my 50th birthday, I became more aware of time than I'd ever been. I felt an almost primal understanding in the core of myself that there was a finite amount of time left, and that feeling permeated everything I did, dictating how I reacted in every moment. It made me more conscious and appreciative of every experience, every awakening. Gee, I'm still here. I have another chance today to get it right. I still try to take in all the experiences, even the negative ones. I take the time, even if it's only 1 minute in the morning, to breathe slowly, let myself feel the connection to all other breathing and vibrating energies in this world and beyond. I've found that recognizing your relationship to infinity makes the finite more palatable. What I know for sure is that giving yourself time to just be is essential to fulfilling your mission as a human being. So I give myself Sundays. Sometimes I spend the whole day in my pajamas. Sometimes I have church under the trees, communing with nature. Most times I just do nothing, piddling I call it, and let my brain and body decompress. Whenever I've slipped up and missed a Sunday, I've noticed a definite change in my disposition for the rest of the week. I know for sure that you cannot give to everybody else and not give back to yourself. You will end up empty, or at best, less than what you can be for yourself and your family and your work. Replenish the well of yourself for yourself. And if you think there's no time to do that, what you're really saying is, I have no life to give to or live for myself. And if you have no life to live for yourself, then why are you here? About a decade ago, I learned a big lesson. The phone was always ringing on Sundays when I'd set that aside as my time. I'd answer and feel agitated and irritable with the person who'd call. Stedman said to me one of those occasions, if you don't want to talk, Why do you keep picking up the phone? Aha moment. Just because the phone is ringing doesn't mean I have to respond. I control what I do with my time. We all do, even when it seems out of control. Protect your time. It is your life. Many times we insist on having all the best things because that's the only way we can ensure quality of life for ourselves. I can neglect myself in every other way, but if I have the best watch or pocketbook or car or square footage, I get to tell myself I am the best and how much I deserve to have even more of the best. What I know for sure, having the best things is no substitute for having the best life. When you can let go of the desire to acquire, you know you are really on your way. I never thought I'd hear myself say this, but I've grown to enjoy lifting weights. I relish the sense of strength and discipline that comes when the muscles are forced to resist. Better still, lifting weights has taught me something about life. I have tried varying schedules, lifting every day, every other day, 2 days on, a day off. The everyday approach was the least effective. Constant lifting begins to break down the muscle tissue. The same is true with mind and spirit. Without giving yourself a chance to re-energize, you begin to break down all the connective fibers of your life. Keeping it all straight is stressful. You need to give yourself moments to rest. I once told my assistant, just because I have 10 free minutes on my calendar doesn't mean I want to fill them. Let's practice what my philosophy preaches, I said. That meant breathing space had to become part of my daily routine. So I began scheduling little moments of calm in which I do nothing for at least 10 minutes. Sometimes I just rub my dog's belly or play a little fetch, or I take a stroll or sit still at my desk. It works wonders. Whenever I give myself these little breaks, I find I have more energy and I'm in a better mood for all the business that comes afterward. I know for sure that a little restoration goes a long way. I don't carry even a twinge of guilt about giving myself that time. I am refilling my tank so that when the next phase begins, I'll be fired up and ready for whatever is to come, fully restored. I always thought I knew why exercise was essential, to not have a fat tush. But I didn't get the real reason until a visit to Johannesburg in 2005. I was visiting the Leadership Academy for Girls, the school I was building at the time, and knew there were many things on my agenda. I was jet-lagged when I arrived, so at 7 o'clock the next morning, I chose not to get up and work out. Instead, I stayed in bed an extra hour to catch up on rest. That was my excuse the first day. By the third day, it was about the treadmill. I didn't like it, not enough cushion support for my knees. After 3 days of not exercising, my resolve to stay fit dissipates. It's easier to lie to myself. I'm too tired, I'm too busy, there's not enough time, are all part of the downward spiral. Unfortunately for me, the resolve to work out is directly tied to the resolve to eat healthfully. If one slips, so does the other. The food at the hotel was not to my liking, so I made a special request for something anyone can make: mashed potatoes. The chefs had no problem whipping some up, and so I ate mashed potatoes and bread every night for the duration of my stay, which was 10 days. 10 days of high glycemic foods combined with no working out equals 10 extra pounds for me. Even worse than the weight gain was the way I felt: exhausted, lethargic. I suddenly had aches and strains I didn't know existed. Aha, I finally got it. When you nurture and support your body, it reciprocates. The basis of that support is exercise, like it or not. The most essential benefit is more energy. Weight control is a bonus. I know for sure that taking care of your body, no matter what, is an investment, and the return is priceless. Among the many things I learned from Eckhart Tolle's A New Earth was this: I am not my body. After studying Tolle's ideas closely, I felt far more connected to consciousness or soul or inner spirit, whatever you choose to name the formless being that is the essence of who we are. I thought of all the years I'd wasted hating myself fat and wanting myself thin, feeling guilty about every croissant, then giving up carbs, then fasting, then dieting, then worrying when I wasn't dieting, then eating everything I wanted until the next diet on Monday or after the holidays or the next big event. All that wasted time, abhorring the thought of trying on clothes, wondering what was going to fit, what number the scale would say. All that energy I could have spent loving what is, who I am, who you are. I know for sure we're not our bodies or the image we hold of them, but because what you give your attention to looms larger, in this case, literally, all my focus on weight actually made me fatter. I can look at a picture from any period of my life, and the first thing that comes to mind is not the event or experience, but my weight and size, because that is how I viewed and judged myself through the prism of numbers. Such wasted time. I've given up scale watching. No longer will I let a number determine how I see myself and whether I'm worthy of a good day. It was an awakening to recognize how shallow and small that made me. You're not your body, and for sure you're not your body image. I try not to waste time because I don't want to waste myself. I'm working on not letting people with dark energy consume any of my minutes on this earth. I've learned that the hard way, after giving up hours of myself and my time, which are synonymous when you think about it. I've learned from my experiences of getting sucked into other people's ego dysfunction that their darkness robs you of your own light, the light you need to be for yourself and for others. What I know for sure is that how you spend your time defines who you are. And I want to shine my light for good. Yes, I freely admit it. I have too many shoes. I also have too many jeans and a designer bonanza of black skirts, size 8 to elastic, plus tank tops, t-shirts, and sweaters. In other words, I have issues with having too much stuff. I'm starting to ask myself this question. Do my things promote joy, beauty, usefulness, or are they just burdensome? I've decided to keep only that which delights me or enhances my well-being. Organizational expert Peter Walsh says in his book, Enough Already, that our homes are overwhelmed with stuff and our lives littered with the empty promises that the stuff didn't fulfill. In buying what we want, we hope to acquire the life we desire. But chasing the life you want by accumulating more stuff is a dead-end street. Well said, Peter Walsh. This I know. More things don't make you feel more alive. Yet feeling more alive is part of fulfilling your true self. It's the reason we're all here. Material excess is about so much more than the physical objects themselves, although we know we need to let things go. Doing so causes anxiety. Yet, I know that letting go leaves space for more to come. That's true of our relationship, not just to shoes, but to all things. Cleaning house, both literally and metaphorically, is a great way to hit the refresh button. There are all kinds of ways to declutter your life, and they have nothing to do with just donating shoes. Say good riddance to decisions that don't support self-care, self-value, and self-worth. Ask yourself, if the people in your life give you energy and encourage your personal growth, or block that growth with dysfunctional dynamic power. When you know better, you do better. Maya Angelou. Whenever I hear Paul Simon's song, Born at the Right Time, I think he must be singing about me. I came into the world in 1954 in Mississippi, a state with more lynchings than any other in the Union, at a time when being a black man walking down the street, minding your business, could make you subject to any white person's accusation or whimsy. A time when having a good job meant working for a nice white family that at least didn't call you nigger to your face. A time when Jim Crow reigned, segregation prevailed, and black teachers themselves, scarcely educated, were forced to use ragged textbooks discarded from white schools. Yet, the same year I was born, a season of change began. In 1954, the Supreme Court ruled in Brown v. Board of Education that black people had the right to equal education. The ruling created hope that life could be better for black folks everywhere. I've always believed free will is a birthright, part of the universe's design for us, and I know that every soul yearns to be free. In 1997, while I was preparing to play Setha in the movie Beloved, I arranged a trip along a portion of the Underground Railroad. I wanted to connect with what it felt like to be a slave, wandering through the woods, making my way north to a life beyond slavery. A life where being free, at its most basic level, meant not having a master telling you what to do, but when I was blindfolded, taken into the woods, and left alone to contemplate which direction led to the next safe house, I understood for the first time that freedom isn't about not having a master. Freedom is about having a choice. In the film, Setha explains what it was like to make the trek to freedom. She said, "Looked like I loved my children more after we got here. Or maybe I knew as long as we were in Kentucky, they really weren't mine to love. Sometimes I hear my boys hear 'em laughing a laugh I ain't never heard. First I get scared somebody might hear 'em and get mad. Then I remember that if they laughed that hard till it hurt, that'd be the only hurt they have all day." She also says, "I'd wake up in the morning and decide for myself what to do with the day, as if thinking, imagine, me, decide." During the shooting of that film, I said those lines over and over, feeling the force they carried. In the years since, Setha's words have remained with me. I rejoice in them daily. Sometimes they're my very first thought before I get out of bed. I can wake up in the morning and decide for myself what to do with the day. Imagine, me, decide. What a gift that is. What I know for sure is that we all need to cherish that gift, to revel in it rather than take it for granted. After the hundreds of stories I've heard of atrocities around the globe, I know that if you are a woman born in the United States, you are one of the luckiest women in the world. Take your good fortune and lift your life to its highest calling. Understand that the right to choose your own path is a sacred privilege. Use it. Dwell in possibility. I have always been a homebody. I know that might be hard to believe given my full schedule, but I usually head home right after work, finish dinner before 7, and climb into bed by 9:30. Even on weekends, home is my all-time favorite hangout. Since I've spent most of my adult life in the public eye, it's important for me to carve out a private space, a refuge, a safe house. Years ago, Goldie Hawn told me she'd created her own safe haven by declaring her home a gossip-free zone. As part of her work for Words Could Heal, a national campaign to eliminate verbal violence, she and her family pledged to replace words that belittle and do damage with those that encourage and rebuild. Her choice to use language that uplifts is in line with a truth Maya Angelou once passed on to me. She said, "I'm convinced that the negative has power, and if you allow it to perch in your house, in your mind, in your life, it can take you over. Those negative words climb into the woodwork, into the furniture, and the next thing you know, they're on your skin." A negative statement, Maya said, is poison. Well, I know firsthand just how hurtful negative words can be. Early in my career, when the tabloids began printing untruthful things about me, I was devastated. I felt so misunderstood, and I wasted a lot of energy worrying about whether people would believe the falsehoods. I had to fight the urge to get on the phone with anybody who maligned me and defend myself. That was before I understood what I now know for sure. When someone spreads lies about you, it's not about you, ever. Gossip, whether in the form of a rumor that's sweeping the nation or a gripe session between friends, reflects the insecurity of those who initiate it. Often, when we make negative statements about others behind their backs, it's because we want to feel powerful, and that's usually because in some way we feel powerless, unworthy, not courageous enough to be forthright. Hurtful words send the message, both to ourselves and to those with whom we share them, that we can't be trusted. If someone is willing to tear down one friend, why wouldn't she be willing to disparage another? Gossip means we haven't emboldened ourselves to talk directly to the people we take issue with, so we belittle them. Playwright Jules Feiffer calls it committing little murders. Gossip is an assassination attempt by a coward. We live in a culture obsessed with gossip. Who's wearing what? Who's dating whom? Who's entangled in the latest sex scandal? What would happen if we declared our homes, our relationships, our lives a gossip-free zone? We'd probably be surprised at how much time we'd free up to do the work that's most significant, building our dreams rather than tearing down others. We'd fill our homes with a spirit of truth that makes visitors want to kick off their shoes and stay a while. And we'd remember that while words have the power to destroy, they also have the power to heal. Some people might find it ironic that I have never been much of a TV watcher. Aside from old reruns of The Andy Griffith Show, I stopped regularly tuning in to sitcoms the night Mary Tyler Moore went off the air. At home, I skip the late-night news because I don't want to take in all that negative energy right before sleep. And on vacation, I seldom have a TV in my bedroom. On days when I do flip through the channels, it's almost certain I'll find at least one show that involves sexual exploitation or violence against women. In my early days on air, I was guilty of doing irresponsible television without even knowing it, all in the name of entertainment. One day, my staff and I booked a husband who'd been caught in an adulterous sex scandal, and right there on our stage, before millions of viewers, his wife heard for the first time that her partner had been unfaithful. It's a moment I've never forgotten. The humiliation and despair on that woman's face made me ashamed of myself for putting her in that position. And right in that moment, I decided I would never again be a part of a show that demeaned, embarrassed, or diminished another human being. I know for sure that what we dwell on is who we become. As a woman thinks, so she is. If we absorb hour upon hour of images and messages that don't reflect our magnificence, it is no wonder we walk around feeling drained of our life force. If we tune in to dozens of acts of brutality every week, it shouldn't surprise us that our children see violence as an acceptable way to resolve conflict. Become the change you want to see. Those are words I live by. Instead of belittling, uplift. Instead of demolishing, rebuild. Instead of misleading, light the way so that all of us can stand on higher ground. There I am, sitting in Mr. Hooper's 5th period algebra class, dreading the test we're about to take, when an announcement over the intercom tells us to go to the auditorium for a special guest speaker. Hooray! I thought I'd been saved. I say that to myself, figuring that'll be the end of algebra for today. My escape is the only thing on my mind as my classmates and I enter the room single file. I settle into my seat and prepare to be bored to sleep in yet another assembly. But when the speaker is introduced as the Reverend Jesse Jackson, a civil rights leader who was with Dr. King the day he was shot, I sit up a little straighter. What I don't yet know is that I'm about to hear the speech of a lifetime. It was 1969. Because I was an A to B student, I thought I already understood the importance of doing my best. But that day, Reverend Jackson lit a fire in me that changed the way I see life. His speech was about the personal sacrifices that had been made for all of us, regardless of how our ancestors came to be here. He talked about those who'd gone before us, who'd paved the way for us to be sitting in an integrated high school in Nashville. He told us that what we owed ourselves was excellence. Excellence is the best deterrent to racism, he said. Therefore, be excellent. I took him at his word. That evening, I went home, found some construction paper, and made a poster bearing his challenge. I taped that poster to my mirror, where it stayed through my college years. Over time, I added my own maxims. If you want to be successful, be excellent. If you want the best the world has to offer, offer the world your best. Those words have helped me over many a hurdle, even when less than my best was evident. To this day, excellence is my intention. To be excellent in giving, in graciousness, in effort, in struggle, and in strife. For me, being excellent means always doing my personal best. In Don Miguel Ruiz's book, The Four Agreements, the final agreement is just that. Always do your best. I know for sure that this is the most fulfilling path to personal freedom. Your best varies from day to day, Ruiz says, depending on how you're feeling. No matter, give your best in every circumstance so that you have no reason to judge yourself and create guilt and shame. Live so that at the end of each day, you can say, I did my very best. That's what it means to excel at the great work of living your best life. My father raised me to believe that being in debt was a terrible thing. In our house, it was almost a character flaw akin to laziness and what he called trifling. So when I moved away from home and was $1,800 in debt within a year, I felt I had failed. I never told my father, nor would I have dared to borrow money from him. Instead, I took out a consolidation loan at 21% interest. I ate a lot of Raisin Bran for dinner and bought the cheapest car I could afford, a bucket on wheels, I used to call it. But it got me to and from work. I tithed 10% to the church and shopped for clothes only once a year. I paid off the $1,800 and vowed never again to create more bills than I could afford. I just hated the way overspending made me feel. My dad saved for everything that mattered, a washer and dryer, a new refrigerator. By the time I left home in Nashville in 1976, he still hadn't gotten a new TV. He said his money just wasn't right. When the Oprah Winfrey Show went national, that's the first thing I bought him, a colored TV, paid for in cash. Why anyone chooses to live a life in debt has always been a puzzle to me. I'll never forget a couple who appeared on my show to talk about their financial plight. They'd been married for only 9 months, but their relationship was already buckling beneath the weight of a gigantic expense. They charged most of their beach wedding in Mexico, paying for hotel rooms and spa treatments for some of their guests, lobster and filet mignon for the wedding dinner, and an open bar. On the other side of this blessed event were credit card bills for almost $50,000. That didn't include the $9,000 the husband had borrowed from his 401k plan to buy the engagement ring. The pursuit of a fairy tale weekend had landed them in a nightmare that lasted for years. What I know for sure, when you define yourself by the things you can acquire, rather than see what you really need to be happy and fulfilled, you're not just living beyond your means or overextending yourself. You are living a lie. That's why being burdened with bills feels so awful. You're being untrue to yourself. When you free yourself from debt, you create space to purchase with purpose, to add to your life things that are meaningful. I still think twice before I buy anything. How will this fit in with what I already have? Am I just caught up in the moment? Can it be of real use to me, or is it just something beautiful to have? I still remember the time years ago when I was in an antique store and the dealer showed me a gorgeous 18th century dressing table with mirrors and hidden drawers. It was polished to such a sheen that the cherry wood seemed to be vibrating. But as I stood pondering whether to purchase it, I said to the man, "You're right, it's beautiful, and I've never seen one quite like it, but I don't really need a dressing table with all that razzle-dazzle." He took a pretentious breath and replied, "Madam, no one buys anything here because of their needs. These are treasures to be enjoyed." Indeed. Well, let me get on down to the need store, I thought, because what I'm really looking for are fireplace utensils. Not only did I not need a dressing table, I didn't even have the space for it. To be fair, Mr. Dealer Man had a point. Some things are just to be treasured and enjoyed. But I know for sure that you enjoy everything a lot more when you're not overreaching. This is how you know you've shopped smart. You bring home a purchase, there's not a tinge of remorse, and whatever you got feels better to you 10 days later than it did when you first bought it. In 1988, I was in Tiffany's trying to decide between two china patterns. I was going back and forth, and finally my shopping buddy said, why don't you just get both? You can afford to. I still remember thinking in that moment, oh my God, I can get both. I started jumping up and down right there in the store like I'd won the lottery. Since that time, I've had many shopping temptations, but knowing that mindfulness matters in all experiences, I try to remain grounded. Another yellow sweater is going to make me feel what? If the answer is nothing, I'll put it back or get it for someone whose day it will brighten, like Gail, who loves yellow the way some people love chocolate. I hope the way you spend your money is in line with the truth of who you are and what you really care about. I hope that your money brings joy to you and the ones you love, and I hope you use it as a powerful force for good to fulfill your best intentions. In my 20s, I attended a prayer breakfast in Washington, D.C. that was sponsored by the National Black Caucus. I had the good fortune to hear a most eloquent preacher from Cleveland, Reverend Otis Moss, Jr., a man who would go on to become a mentor and friend. That day, Reverend Moss told a story that abides with me to this day. His father, a poor sharecropper, worked all his life to raise and care for his family, suffering the same sort of indignities and humiliations that generations before him had long endured. But in his 50s, he finally had a chance to do what those generations never had, cast his vote in an election. On election day, he rose before dawn, dressed in his best suit, the one he wore to weddings and funerals, and prepared to walk to the polls to vote against a racist Georgia governor in favor of a moderate. 6 miles he walked. When he got there, he was told he was in the wrong place and was sent to another location. He walked another 5 or 6 miles and was met with the same denial before being sent to a third voting place. When he arrived at the third location, they told him, "Boy, you're a little late. The polls just closed." After walking all day, covering more than 18 miles, he returned home, exhausted and depleted, never having experienced the joy of voting. Otis Moss Sr. told this story to anyone who would listen, and lived in great anticipation of his next chance to cast his vote. He died before the next election. He never got that chance to choose. So now I do. And every time I cast a ballot, I choose not only for myself, but also for Otis Moss Sr., and for the countless others who wanted to but couldn't. I cast a ballot for everybody who came before me and gave their life's energy so that yours and mine could be a force that matters today. Sojourner Truth, speaking at the Women's Rights Convention in Akron, Ohio in 1851, said, "If the first woman God ever made was strong enough to turn the world upside down all alone, these women together ought to be able to turn it back and get it right side up again." We'd see amazing changes if women took to the polls en masse. Recent voting statistics are embarrassing and disrespectful to our female heritage, to every woman who had no voice but hoped someday her daughters might be heard. In 2008, only about 2/3 of eligible female voters bothered to cast a ballot. And remember, the 2000 presidential election was decided by only 537 votes. I know for sure we ought to respect ourselves and our forebears enough to be counted. We are a country that spends 95% of our healthcare dollars on treating illness and less than 5% on staying well and preventing it. How mixed up is that? The paradigm needs to change, and the change begins with how we choose to see ourselves, as purveyors of health or as conveyors of disease. The ultimate in being healthy is to operate at full throttle, physically, emotionally, spiritually. It's being alert, feeling alive and connected. And if you look at your life as a circle and all its aspects, family, finance, relationships, work, among others, as sections of it, you'll see that if one part is malfunctioning, it will affect the whole. There have been many times in my life when I put far too much emphasis on work and not nearly enough on taking care of me. There is a huge difference between attending to the needs of your personality, your ego, and caring for your true self. Making that distinction can save you a lot of wasted time. This, I know for sure. You've got to be in touch with your mind, body, and spirit to live the life you were meant to. When all three are completely engaged, you're able to fulfill your potential on earth. It is a decision you make to pursue what you were called here to do and not just meander through your days. The average life expectancy for an American woman is 80. That's a prediction, not a promise. What you do today creates every tomorrow. To own the abundant life that's waiting for you, you have got to be willing to do the real work. Not your job, not your career profile, but heeding your spirit, which is whispering its greatest desires for you. You've got to get silent sometimes to hear it and check in regularly. You must feed your mind with thoughts and ideas that open you to greater possibilities. When you stop learning, you cease to grow and subconsciously tell the universe you've done it all. Nothing new for you, so why are you here? You can't keep pretending that your body will function forever no matter how you treat it. Your body wants to move. It wants to be fed well. If you're sprinting through life as though it's a race you have to win, you need to slow down and schedule some rest, because the truth is, you have already won. You're still here with another chance to get it right. Do better and be better, starting now. Years ago on my show, a young mother shared her frustration with getting her son to go to bed. Her son was 3 years old and ruling the house. He wanted to sleep in her bed. He refused to even lie down in his own, and the more the mother insisted, the more the child resisted, yelling and screaming until he literally dropped from exhaustion. We showed a tape with the two of them battling it out. When our expert, Dr. Stanley Turecki, finished watching, he said something that made the hairs on my arm stand up. He said this: "Nothing happens until you decide." The reason this 3-year-old boy didn't sleep in his own bed was that his mother had not decided it would happen. When she did, the child would go to his bed. He might cry and scream and rant until he fell asleep, but he would eventually realize that his mother had made up her mind. Well, I knew Dr. Turecki was speaking about a 3-year-old, but I also knew for sure that this brilliant piece of advice applied to many other aspects of life. Relationships, career moves, weight issues. Everything depends on your decisions. When you don't know what to do, my best advice is to do nothing until clarity comes. Getting still, being able to hear your own voice and not the voices of the world, quickens clarity. Once you decide what you want, make a commitment to that decision. One of my favorite quotes is from mountaineer W.H. Murray, who says, "Until one is committed, there is hesitancy, the chance to draw back, always ineffectiveness. Concerning all acts of initiative and creation, there is one elementary truth, the ignorance of which kills countless ideas and splendid plans, that the moment one definitely commits oneself, then Providence moves too. All sorts of things occur to help one that would never otherwise have occurred. A whole stream of events issues from the decision, raising in one's favor all manner of unforeseen incidents and meetings and material assistance, which no man could have dreamt would have come his way." I have learned a deep respect for one of Goethe's couplets, "Whatever you can do, or dream you can, begin it. Boldness has genius, power, and magic in it." Make a decision and watch your life move forward. I am always fascinated by lists of most powerful people and by the ways they use external things, fame, status, wealth, to define and rank power. It's curious how a person can go from the top of the list one year to unlisted the next, all in the blink of a board meeting. Was that person's power real, or was the power only in the position? We often get the two confused. When I think of authentic power, I think of the power that occurs when purpose aligns with personality to serve the greater good. For me, the only real power is the kind that comes from the core of who you are and reflects all that you were meant to be. When you see this kind of power shining through someone in all its truth and certainty, it is irresistible, inspiring, elevating. The secret is alignment. When you know for sure that you're on course and doing exactly what you're supposed to be doing, fulfilling your soul's intention, your heart's desire. When your life is on course with its purpose, you are at your most powerful. And though you may stumble, you will not fall. I went down to Louisiana 5 days after Katrina hit to witness for myself the disastrous effects of that hurricane. Maya Angelou described it so profoundly, saying, "The land became water, and the water thought it was God." I spent no more than 10 minutes in the Superdome in New Orleans, where thousands of families had waited and waited for 5 days for help to come. Days afterward, I thought I could still smell the urine and feces mixed with the pungency of decaying flesh. I said on the air, I think we all, this country, owe these families an apology. The next day, Gayle King, who in addition to being my best friend is also O Magazine's editor-at-large, got a phone call from an irate reader canceling her subscription because Oprah has gotten too big for her britches, telling us the government needs to apologize to those people. What I know for sure is that behind every catastrophe, there are great lessons to be learned. One of the greatest? As long as we play the us and them game, we don't evolve. As people, as a nation, as a planet. Katrina gave us an opportunity to live in the space of an open heart and to show our compassion. Over the years, I've heard many people lamenting why God allows this or God allows that. Another lesson. People suffer not because of what God does, but because of what we do and not do. So much of what happened in the aftermath of Katrina was man-made, and as we all saw, there was plenty of blame to go around, but the storm also gave us a chance to see that in moments of desperation, fear, helplessness, each of us can be a rainbow of hope, doing what we can to extend ourselves in kindness and grace to one another. Because I know for sure There is no them. There's only us. In January 2009, I appeared on the cover of O twice, two versions of me standing side by side, a before and after. In one image, the before, I was in good shape. In the after, I was overweight. I had the confidence to show these photos of myself because I knew I wasn't alone. An estimated 66% of American adults are either overweight or obese, and almost nobody's happy about it. That cover stirred an outpouring of emotion and avalanche of support. One of the most memorable responses I got was this email from a friend. "Here's how I see your weight. It is your smoke detector, and we're all burning up the best part of ourselves," it said. I'd never thought of it that way before, but it was a true aha moment. My weight was an indicator warning, a flashing light blaring my disconnection from the center of myself. What I now know for sure is that for me, weight is a spiritual issue, not a food issue. Marianne Williamson struck a nerve when she sent this email. "Your weight," she said, "is really an invitation to your best life." All those years of diets doomed to fail, I thought weight was the barrier. I told myself I had a weight problem. Instead of looking at my out-of-balance existence and how I use food to repress the facts. I once co-authored a book with Bob Greene called Make the Connection. The title was his idea. Even while writing my part, which involved sharing my frustrated journal entries about being fat, I weighed 237 pounds when Bob and I met. I would often say to him, "Remind me again, what is the connection?" I did learn from Bob that my overeating wasn't about potato chips, that I needed to peel back the layers of my addiction to food and figure out what was eating me. Obviously, I hadn't peeled deeply enough. But now I know that the connection is loving, honoring, and protecting everything about yourself. Bob has often said to me, your weight is ultimately tied to your feelings of unworthiness. For years, I vehemently disagreed, saying, "Listen, Bob Greene, let me tell you one thing. I am not one of those people who think they don't deserve what they have. I've worked hard for everything I own." But as I move along this spiritual path to permanently resolving and managing the weight issue, I now see that a sense of unworthiness can come in many forms. I've been an overachiever since I was 3 years old. For years, I felt the need to show that I belonged here, the need to prove my worth. I worked hard. I got A's. I won speaking contests. I earned scholarships. I was in my mid-30s before I realized that just being born makes you worthy enough to be here. I had nothing to prove. For most of us who overeat, extra pounds correspond to unresolved anxieties, frustrations, depressions, which all come down to fear we haven't worked through. We submerge the fear in food instead of feeling it and dealing with it. We repress it all with offerings from the fridge. If you can conquer the fear, you will fly. That's another for sure. Let your life awaken in you. Whatever your challenge, overeating, overindulging in substance or activity, the loss of a relationship, money, position, let it be an open door to your holiest revelations about yourself, an invitation to your best life. I love to watch the sun set over Maui, transforming the sky. Nature has an easier time with transformation than we earthly beings do. Evolving as a human being is a lifelong excavation process, digging deep to uncover your underlying issues. Sometimes it feels like trying to shovel through Kilimanjaro. You keep hitting rock. What I've discovered, though, rocks unattended turn into mounds and then mountains. And it is our job to do daily cleanups in our work, our family, our relationships, our finances, our health. Ignoring problems is easier for sure, but if we take even tiny steps to address them, those steps eventually become giant leaps on the journey to self-actualization. Reaching your potential as a person is more than an idea. It is the ultimate goal. The wonders we're capable of have nothing to do with the measurement of mankind, the lists of what's in and what's out, who's hot and who's not. I'm talking about the real deal here. Whose life did you touch? Who did you love? and who loved you back. This I know for sure is what matters. For me, it's the only goal worth aiming for, a transformation of consciousness that allows me to know that I am no better or worse than any other being, that I simply am. In the 3rd grade, I learned the golden rule. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. I love those words. I wrote them on everything and carried them around in my book satchel. Remember book satchels? I was a good deed doer. At one point, I even thought I was going to be a missionary. Every Sunday, I'd go to church, sit second pew to the right, take out a notepad, and write down everything the minister said. At school the next day, I would recite the sermon on the playground. I called it Monday morning devotion. The other 8-year-olds would see me coming and say, "Here comes that preacher girl." Back then, when the Progressive Missionary Baptist Church was trying to raise money for the poor children of Costa Rica, I started a campaign. I was going to collect more money than anyone else. I gave up my lunch money and convinced my classmates to do the same. It was all part of the principle of do unto others that I lived by. Then, in the 5th grade, I ran into some problems. There was a girl in my class who didn't like me, so I went around school talking about her. One of my friends pointed out that if I believed in doing unto others and was talking about this girl, chances are she was talking about me too. "I don't care," I replied, "because I don't like her anyway." For a long time, whenever I would say or do something that went against my better self, I would try to justify it. What I didn't understand is that all of our actions, both good and bad, come back to us. But eventually I learned that we receive from the world what we give to the world. I understand it from physics as the 3rd law of motion. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. It is the essence of what Eastern philosophers call karma. In The Color Purple, the character Celie explained it to Mr. by saying, "Everything you try to do to me, already done to you." Your actions revolve around you as surely as the earth revolves around the sun. This is why when people say they're looking for happiness, I ask, what are you giving to the world? It's like the wife who once appeared on my show wondering why her relationship with her husband had broken down. She kept saying, "He used to make me so happy. He doesn't make me happy anymore." What she couldn't see was that she was the cause of her own effect. Happiness is never something you get from other people. The happiness you feel is in direct proportion to the love or happiness you're able to give. If you think something is missing in your life or you're not getting what you deserve, remember, there's no yellow brick road. You lead life. It doesn't lead you. See what comes into your life when you spend extra time with your children. Let go of your anger with your boss or coworker and see what gets returned. Be loving to yourself and others and see that love reciprocated. This rule works every time, whether or not you're aware of it. It occurs in little things, big things, and the biggest things. Today, I try to do well and be well with everyone I encounter. I make sure to use my life for goodwill because I know for sure that what I think, what I say, what I do, everything will be returned to me. And the same is true for you.